Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 72. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. We got something a little bit different today. We got a bonus pod where we're breaking down the Stanley Cup Playoffs, and we brought out the big guns to help us out as we deep dive through each and every playoff series to give you the goodness to try to help you make some money. We'll get to that in a sec, but first, daily odds boost. That sounds awesome to us. From the NBA playoffs to the Stanley Cup playoffs to the MLB, DRF Sportsbook is boosting odds across all your favorite sports daily. Will Kirill Kaprizov score a hat trick for the Wild? Will Kyle Hendricks strike out 8 while towing the rubber for the Cubs? What about Giannis scoring 30 and the Bucks winning? Player props like these are boosted every single day at the DRF Sportsbook, giving you a chance to cash in big. So head over to DRF Sportsbook app or ia.drf.com, check out the My Bets tab, and start betting on some boosts today. Must be physically present in Iowa to wager. So as mentioned, multiple guests will join us today to break down everything you need to know about the NHL playoffs. I'm going to be begging them to tell me how good of a chance my Leafs have of making their Stanley Cup run. That's what I want to know. But there's also tons of other opportunities to make some money. What more can you want? As the Stanley Cup playoffs get underway on Monday night, we've got you covered right here on the DRF Sports Podcast. And that starts for you right about now. We're full on in gear with the NBA playoffs. And of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs is a little late, but still here. And we're happy for that because some might call it the best time in sports, especially the first round of the NHL playoffs, because it's very unpredictable. But we try to find and win within the margins. And to do that, of course, our guy, Mr. Matt Russell, is here to break things down. And my first question here, as we dive into this deep dive NHL playoff pod, is how do you even bet on hockey? Like, obviously there's different ways that we look at the NBA compared to the NFL. So when it comes to the NHL, what are the things that you're looking for here in terms of gauges?
Yeah, it's funny. And, you made a great point, right? Like nothing changes, no sport changes from the regular season to the postseason the way that hockey does, right? Playoff hockey versus regular season hockey is so much different. Again, we have NBA playoffs, like, yeah, okay, things tighten up, but that's mainly because the players actually participate in the postseason versus taking random days off, et cetera, and you're never really sure what motivations are from night to night. In the NHL, we know what the motivations are, right? If you're in this, you're playing for free at this point, right? The guys have already gotten their money, and this is just for one goal and one goal only, and that's to win the Stanley Cup, right? Everything these guys have ever sort of dreamt about is coming down to this, which is great for us as bettors because we at least know motivations. We know that everything is 100% all of the time. That being said, it's different from the regular season. So we have to sort of, wade through what we know about the regular season and take that into the playoffs. And the fundamental area for me is with even strength play, right? Because during the regular season, penalties are getting called, things are getting relatively loose, and, power plays and all of that sort of stuff. In the NHL, once the Stanley Cup playoffs come around, right, the whistles get a little bit tighter, right? You have to almost murder a guy in order to get a penalty called on you, right? And so that means even strength play is going to be more important. So the regular season, you can build up a pretty good record by having a really good power play and a really good penalty kill, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously in the minutia, having a good penalty kill is going to be important, and having a good power play is nice too. But if you just pull up right now, power play leaders, the best team in the league is about 25%. The worst team in the league is about 15%. And by the way, that team is probably long gone. So even strength play is really important because another reason, Overtime, right? How many of these games go to overtime? What happens in overtime? There's no 4-on-4. There's no 3-on-3. There is no, you know what I mean? There's no shootout. Whatever gimmick the NHL has thrown at us over the last 2 decades is out the window. It is 5-on-5 until somebody scores. We may be here all night, right? So again, if 5-on-5 play is going to be how most games are decided, especially in overtime, 5-on-5 play, even strength, has to be the metrics with which we decide which team is better and how we evaluate those teams. So we do that by a couple of different things. One, measuring high danger chance creation, right? If you and I are playing and you create more high danger chances in the opposing zone than I do, then there's a higher probability that you're going to have more goals at the end of the game than I am. The other thing that's going to happen is if you're creating those chances and you are having the dominant run of play, you're probably going to draw more penalties. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 extra power plays in a game. That's when the power plays become more relevant, right? But at the core, you get power plays by playing well at even strength. The other thing is high danger chance conversion, right? If you're really good at converting those high danger chances, if you're just not very good at scoring and you're only converting, the league average is about 13% of the time. So 13% of your high danger chances should result in goals. If you're only converting at like 9%, that's on you, right? That's indicative of poor conversion, of poor finishing, if you will. If you're higher than that, kudos to you. That means you've got some snipers on your team, that sort of thing. The other thing is, and this is sort of related, interrelated with all this, expected goals. You hear a lot about expected goals, soccer, hockey. That's what this is, even strength expected goals. If you are having a higher expected goal share, i.e. you're expected to score 55% of the goals on a given night, you're obviously much more likely to win a game. Now, again, you can start messing with that a little bit once you get into power plays and all of that sort of thing. So again, we want even strength expected goals. Then lastly, on the defensive end, well, if we're creating high danger chances, that's good offensively. But what do we want to do on defense? We want to limit high danger chances, right? So the fewer the high danger chances, the less your goaltender is exposed to really difficult shots. By the way, we talked about HDC conversion, high danger chance conversion. How about high danger chance stopping, right? If the other team, if your opponent is having trouble converting those high danger chances, means your goaltending and your defense is coming through at that very end of the play, right? And then finally, goaltending, goals saved above expectation for goaltenders, right? This is a metric that says, okay, we used to talk about goals against average and save percentage and that sort of thing. And guys like Grant Fuhr in the late 80s would win Stanley Cups and his goals against average would be through the roof because his team scores a lot of goals too. But that doesn't really tell you how good the goaltender is, right? We need something to tell us, okay, how many goals is this guy saving or letting in on the flip side above or below expectation? And so we throw all those into the pot, so to speak, and we create a formula essentially. And that's how I come up with my win probabilities when it comes to game. You throw some home ice advantage in there, depending on, where the game is being played, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, et cetera, right? And then we come up with our money line and our probabilities over the course of a series. And so, I mentioned the less emphasis on power play and penalty kill because a lot of people will be like, oh, look at this team. Like they're so dangerous on the power play, et cetera, right? Think about it this way. Teams that are great, 25% on the power play is probably going to lead the league in power play efficiency. That means 1 out of 4 on a given night, right? So you're getting 1 goal out of your power play if you're getting 4 chances. One, you're not necessarily guaranteed in the playoffs to get 4 power plays, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. But 2, some of these teams that are mediocre, let's say like as we used to call them, an 8th seed, a wild card team now, maybe they're only good 20%, 19% of the time, something along those lines. Some quick math means 1 out of every 5 power plays are going to be converted into a goal. So you got 1 out of every 4 versus 1 out of every 5. Well, you know what? If my team is better at even strength, then I'm more likely to get that 5th power play, which means once I get that 5th power play, statistically, doesn't really matter that you're 25% and I'm 20%. We're both going to average 1 goal per game on the power play. Now, can some teams score? Can there be an outlier? Can they score 3 times out of 5 in a game? Something along those lines. Can they just dominate a team on the power play over the course of a series? Yeah, that happens all the time. But statistically, that's unlikely, and that's an outlier. You get things like Tampa last year where Nikita Kucherov comes back and they immediately are like 45% on the power play. And so anytime somebody got a penalty on the opposing team, you're just like, oh man, there's literally a 50-50 chance that Tampa Bay is going to convert. That's an outlier situation, right? Like those are things that you cannot predict in the same way that you can't predict like a hot goaltender. Right. And we like to think we can, predict hot goaltenders. Maybe it's Igor Shesterkin because he was so good this season. Maybe it's Tristan Jarry, right? Like going up against the Rangers. Maybe he's just awesome for 7 straight games, right? Mm-hmm. There's always a hot goaltender. We just almost never know who that's going to be before the season or before the postseason starts. So rather than trying to predict that this team's going to be awesome on the power play, this team's going to have the hot goaltender, we just play there at the averages, the probabilities, right? And then that's where the pricing comes in with money lines and series. Is this probability higher or lower than we think is going to happen? And that's fundamentally it, right? Then you just sort of sit back and hope the puck bounces the right way, especially when we get into overtime. And that's just fundamentally how I've played it. And, sometimes you get lucky where the Montreal Canadiens beat the Leafs last year and you cash a bunch of bets and they beat the Golden Knights because of the pricing being so far out of control of where it should be for a league and a playoff that every year has surprises, right? Everything feels 50-50 when the puck actually drops and we find ourselves 3-3, 2-2 in overtime. Things can go either way. It's just at the end of the day, all about probabilities, more so than any other sport, because there's a lot of luck involved, but you can't get lucky unless you have the puck in the other team's zone. And if you're creating more high danger scoring chances than you're going to be in really good shape.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And that's a super dope breakdown, especially for someone like me that might not understand the ins and outs of hockey betting. But the knowledge being dropped doesn't stop there. We got another special guest that will join us on the other side of this little break here. So stay tuned. And as mentioned, it's a very special episode of the DRF Sports Podcast, is because the hockey playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs are here. We have to bring in the big guns. So we got Michael Leboff here, the Line Change Podcast on the Action Network. Mike, how's it going?
It's going really well. I'm excited to get this stuff started on Monday night. The Eastern Conference especially, it's going to be a real bear. So I can't wait to dig into this stuff with you guys.
Well, the vibes are different this year, eh, Mike?
Yeah,
the vibes are different for you.
Vibes are a little different. Vibes are definitely a little different without the Islanders. I'm not going to the Coliseum every day at 3 p.m. with
I wasn't going to go
box
there.
Of pizza. Yeah,
I was going to let that slide. I wasn't going to go there. I was going to let it slide, but you brought it up.
Listen. Michael and I are this year, and for me, it's a couple of years now. I guess just one because we had a little run in the bubble there. But I am a born and bred Canucks fan. Don't like to admit that. I don't like to admit that, not because I'm not proud of my heritage. It's more just like, I don't really want people to know that I am a fan of any team. And this would be the one team that I actually admit to being a fan of. Though, you know me, it comes down to the numbers, whether we're betting on them or not. Fortunately, not an issue this year. So, Michael, is it easier for you when the Islanders are not in it? I mean, obviously your attention is different, maybe a couple less hangovers along the way. Is it easier for you to sit back? I know, I got into betting on hockey in its other era when the Canucks were never making the playoffs. So is it easier for you from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think so. And I actually, when I started betting on hockey, the Islanders were terrible. So it was very easy to kind of just be like, I'll bet against them because their games don't matter to me. But last year they were a dog in every game of the playoffs. They played 19 games, they were an underdog in every game. So it's not like I wasn't too concerned with it because my numbers kept showing value on the Islanders. So it was almost like this beautiful marriage of my two kind of lives as a sports fan and a bettor. It definitely will be easier, less stressful. Although I do have, two eternal rivals in the pool here that I need to make sure they get out. Don't ruin my life. So it's still stressful. The NHL playoffs are of course a slow form of torture, but it will be a little bit easier to kind of just get the work done before stressing about who the Islanders are scratching for the night.
Pain in lowercase letters, not capitalized letters.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Amazing stuff, guys. And what we're going to try to do here, we're going to try to breeze through every single playoff series. I'll go back and forth between the two of you guys. And since we're talking about who our favorite teams are, maybe we'll start with my favorite team, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are back in the playoffs, trying to get out of the first round again. How often have we heard that? But game one, you got Tampa Bay at plus 105. The Leafs minus 125. Over-under number is at 6.5. Matt, I'm going to start with you here on this Lightning Leaf series. How are you looking at this series from a betting standpoint?
Yeah, well, so I moved to Toronto in 2005. So I've been here 17 years, and I'm still waiting on the Leafs to win a playoff series, make the second round. And I've been delighted by it. It's been a really great time for this 17 years. Unfortunately, from that side of things, Shell, I think your squad is going to do it this time around, man. I've had this series targeted not just for this year, not just for this last week, for a couple of years now. You can think back to the bubble. Remember when the Blue Jackets knocked off the Leafs? I thought that was a bad matchup for the Leafs, right? They don't want that hard team. Same thing with the Bruins every time that they play that team. The Lightning, obviously, they are hard because this is a team that's won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. But the bigger issue here is it's not that there's value on the Leafs. It's that it's not an absolute gouge job from a pricing standpoint on the Leafs this year. This is one where you can actually bet on the Leafs and not be embarrassed about doing so because you're getting the absolute worst price you could possibly imagine. And all it took was a matchup against the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. So that's what we got, right? We like, okay, how do we get value on the Maple Leafs? How about a team that hasn't lost a playoff series since before a pandemic, right? So I just look at this and I go, listen, my numbers make this, about 50-50 with a slight advantage to the Leafs, mainly because their home ice advantage has been a lot better this year than in years past. And so I think it's a fair price. It's certainly a more fair price on Toronto at minus 120, whether you're talking game one or the series, than it is at the, for the Lightning at plus 100. And, there's a reason it's really, really hard to win. It's really, really hard to win 2 straight Stanley Cups. A little bit easier on the body when it's in the bubble and you don't have all the travel elements that the Lightning had 2 years ago. It's really, really hard to win it 3 times in a row. We just don't see that now. Again, they're not going to hand out the Stanley Cup for the Lightning beating the Leafs, though people of my ilk would certainly want to give them an award. I think Michael is probably in that camp of fashioning his own award for anybody who wins, who knocks the Leafs off, sort of like a poker bounty type of a situation. But I think this is actually one where we're going to bet on the Leafs. Now, I'm not going to do it beyond this because there are no 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions down the road here to take some of the value. I just think in this case, this is Leafs. I'm going to have them to win the series. I'm also going to play them Leafs in 7 games here. It's available at plus 500. This isn't going to be easy, right? And having the home ice advantage and having that game 7 at home means we're probably going to see a game 7 price of around minus 120. I think there's a very good chance we reach that game 7. And when you're sitting there with a plus 500, even a plus 400 Leafs in 7 ticket, you can make some moves around that depending on how you feel, A, about the team, and B, about whether or not you're selling your soul betting on the Leafs to advance in a Stanley Cup playoff series.
Mike, what do you think, man?
Yeah, a little bit of disagreement here. I think Tampa Bay at plus money, considering the goaltending edge, and this isn't to say that Jack Campbell's gonna. I think a lot of people take what I'm about to say because you hear it a lot and saying, "Oh, he's saying Jack Campbell's gonna struggle." I don't think that's the case. I think Jack Campbell will probably be fine in the series, but when you're going up against Andrei Vasilevsky, the best goalie in the world that we've seen for the past 3 years. This season notwithstanding, he was maybe the 3rd best goalie in the world. So a huge drop off from him. You're just the gap is wide enough. And I think when you think about the Leafs, and people bring up this all the time when they play in these playoff series, is where did Marner and Matthews go? Where did the offense go? They're too top heavy, and it's not really their fault, right? It's the fact that when you get to the playoffs, you play a good team every night. So it's harder to score. It's harder to score against Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough and Eric Chernak than it is to score against, all due respect to the Ottawa Senators, a team that is near and dear to my heart. But if you're playing the Senators one night, the Lightning the next, 2 nights later, and then you play, the Predators, it's a much different environment than going up against 30 minutes of McDonough, 30 minutes of Hedman, 28 minutes of Chernak. And then if you get by them and actually create a scoring chance, you got to beat Vasilevsky. So right away, I think those guys, that defense and the depth they have, not only on defense, but a forward and the responsible two-way forwards that they have. Anthony Cirelli is a terrific shutdown center. It just makes the job harder for Matthews, Marner, and the Leafs. And if those guys don't perform, then we're talking about the series completely shifts. The edge goes right to Tampa Bay.
Sure.
So I think getting plus money on the Lightning is worth a shot here. And I think that's true series price, game one line. And I'll probably be playing the Lightning here. And I think if you had flipped it, right, if the Lightning were if you were getting the Leafs at plus money, so maybe for games 3 and 4, I'll be on Toronto, unfortunately. But I think it's these games are just coin flips in the series. There's very, very little that separates these two teams, and the biggest thing I think the biggest edge you'll find is the one in goal.
All right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, that's certainly a point against Leafs, and honestly, it's why this series is the coin flip that it is. Leafs have the home ice advantage. They have played much better at home. Also, they have played much better 5-on-5 this year. And so when you're talking about, it's funny, we talk about this with football and basketball, where you look at a matchup and we tend to go, oh man, this cornerback is going to shut down this wide receiver. This defensive player is going to shut down, the best offensive player in the league or affect him in some way. And we automatically sort of look for the defensive player to have that impact. We almost never give credit to the offensive player, where we're just like, you know what, Jamar Chase is just really good and he's going to catch a long pass against Jalen Ramsey in the Super Bowl. Like, that's just a thing because he's really good. If somebody is going to be able to get through the Tampa Bay defense, the Tampa Bay goaltending, why wouldn't it be the guy with 60 goals, right? And who has some depth on that team? Again, like I mentioned, I live in Toronto. They happen to sort of forget the Nylander injury from, last year. That's a massive blow to the depth. And I took advantage of that by betting the heck out of the Montreal Canadiens last year. But I have to at least remember that that's a thing that happened, right? And so the depth with Toronto, having those guys all healthy, ready to go, and having this next level, again, whether it's Matthews or whether it's the even strength play that's improved so much from even just last year. It's not the same team, right? This team should be, if it's not now, I shouldn't say if it's not now, when, because it could easily be next year. It could be the year after that. And maybe it's not because they're going to have to deal with the Floridas, the Bostons, and the Tampas, basically, unless there's radical realignment. Maybe it isn't. Again, I just look at it and go, I think we're going to go 7 games here. I think the Leafs, at home in that 7th game with this matchup, I think they have a decent chance here from a valuation standpoint. Again, something that I think is literally 52-48. And so once we get into that semantics, right, it's like, I think it's 52-48. And like Michael's like, well, I think it's 51-49. It's like, that's a really, really tiny edge of a disagreement here. So I'm completely fine with seeing how this plays out and probably going to game 7 and watching the world burn, so to speak, one way or another.
So I'll keep this going here and I'll stick with you, Michael. Bruins, Hurricanes. Series price split right there, -110 on either side. Boston, though, in game 1 at +100, Carolina -120. This is a very interesting series for a lot of different reasons, but how are you looking at this from a betting angle?
I love the Bruins. I like them across the board. I like them as a Stanley Cup future. They're 20-1 at some places still. That was a number I got in February. There's a weird phenomenon with the Bruins was they got off to a not a great start. They were good, but because in the Atlantic Division, the Maple Leafs, the Panthers, and the Lightning just shot out of a cannon, and the Bruins were basically the 4th place team all season long, people weren't really paying attention to them. In fact, people were asking questions. What's wrong with the Bruins? Even though they were clearly going to make the playoffs and they were going to be fine. And then there were questions about their goaltending. Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark as a tandem. Tuukka Rask came back, tried to come back from an injury. It didn't work out. They go back with Swayman and Ullmark. And since Rask came back and then retired again, Linus Ullmark has been good. I think, that kind of cloud of uncertainty hanging over that tandem's head maybe affected them. And if you look at their underlying numbers, they're the same Bruins that we've seen for the past 6-7 years. And those same Bruins usually go into the playoffs at like 11-1, 8-1, whatever. They're a defensive dynamo, leading the league in expected goals against, leading the league in high dangerous chances against at 5-on-5. So they're one of a few teams that can really handle this Carolina onslaught at 5-on-5. And I think, I make the Bruins a favorite here, even without home ice advantage, because the goaltending is a wash with Freddie Anderson hurt for the Hurricanes, Linus Ullmark, Antti Raanta. Like if you want to, like Matt was saying with semantics, if you want to try to say, Antti Raanta is going to be a much better goalie than Linus Ullmark, you might be right, like in the series, but we don't know. We don't know anything about these two goalies and how they're going to handle themselves in the series. I do know that the more likely scenario is the Bruins will make Linus Ullmark's job a little easier than the Hurricanes will for Antti Raanta or the rookie Kochetkov if he has to play. So I think we're getting the same price, or the same Bruins that we usually get going into the playoffs at double the price. So I like Boston in the series. I like Boston Stanley Cup future. And I also like, if you want, Patrice Bergeron 60-1 to win the Conn Smythe, but David Pasternak's around 50-1, Charlie McAvoy's 100-1. I think if you want to sprinkle one of those guys to put along with the ride on the future, it's a great value. And this Boston team, they have a good path too, right? They finished in probably the best spot outside of winning the Atlantic Division, which you can make maybe winning the Atlantic Division. Like you can still make the argument was not as rewarded as what the Bruins got, right? They're going to play in the Metro against three teams. Their potential opponents are three teams that Boston is better than. So I think the Bruins really caught a break, and I just like how everything's kind of lining up for them heading into the tournament.
I couldn't agree more with every single word that Michael said there. Like, I'm just like checking off notes over here, right? To add to that really is I have Bruins as being 20% better than average after the All-Star break, right? And for me, a lot of times you go, okay, what have you done for me lately, right? Post All-Star break, what's your record coming into the playoffs, blah, 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 blah. How well, what is your form, right? How well are you playing come into the playoffs? This year, more than any other year ever, I put basically all of my eggs into the after All-Star break basket. And the reason for that is, and Michael can tell you, before the All-Star break, betting on the NHL was a total farce, right? You had the COVID testing and guys are in and out of the lineups, and I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what's going on. There's minus 500 like favorites because 3 guys on the underdog are out, and we're just like, I don't know how to even add that up. I don't even know how to value any of these teams when half of their players or some of their good players or their goaltenders out, that sort of thing. And so I'm taking a lot of before the All-Star break and I am throwing that out. And you're saying like, well, why the All-Star break? Why is that the line of demarcation? Well, the reason is they stopped testing basically at the All-Star break, right? They pulled back on the testing big time. And we actually had a legitimate season from the All-Star break onward. And so whether the Bruins, that they were more affected than anybody else doesn't really matter. The point is that after the All-Star break, they were, as Michael mentioned, the team of old. And that's a team we talk a lot about branding, and some of these teams who get credit for being who they are, for the logo on the front of their jersey. For whatever reason, Boston just doesn't seem to be getting that the way that they normally do. Normally you have to make excuses on why Boston's going to lose, and then you bet against them, and then you're just tortured by Brad Marchand, just torturing the goaltender. And so, they're going to make it easier on their own goaltender. They're also not going to make it easy on whoever's in net for Carolina. And Carolina doesn't have the defense. Dougie Hamilton's gone, et cetera. They don't have the defensive size that's going to be able to push these guys away. And so we saw it last year. Now the Bruins ended up getting knocked off by Michael's Islanders, but the Taylor Hall edition last year was big. That boosted their ratings up quite a bit. And that's been the same thing post All-Star break, right? And so I put so much more emphasis on the post All-Star break stuff. I've got Boston to win the series. I'm with Michael as far as the futures are concerned. Boston -1.5 in the series handicap is +170. -70. That is wild, given the fact that a game 6 would happen in Boston. By the way, this Boston team didn't even really take advantage of their home ice advantage, right? You say, okay, give me 3 teams who have an over and above home ice advantage in the NHL. You're probably going to list Boston. They didn't have that much better of a record at home and than they did on the road, right? This is a team at current status who's going to be incredibly difficult to beat at home. So I have them -1.5. I have Boston 14-1 to sweep the Hurricanes. Now that might just come into play here on these first 2 games without Frederik Andersen for Carolina. If Boston hops on Carolina and beats them 2 times on the road and has a 2-0 lead headed back to Boston, you're going to be thrilled that you have 14-1 on the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, that's going to be a great series in Boston. I mean, Boston primed for another playoff run. Where have we seen that before? That never happens, right? Matt, though, we'll stick with you and we'll switch to the Penguins Rangers series. Game 1 of this series, you got the Pens at +100, Rangers at -120. The series price, though, is very interesting. Is the Pens are at -105, Rangers -115. Very interesting stuff there, as the Pens are actually healthy for once. But how does that all play into what you see in this series and how it's going to play out?
Yeah, it's funny, right? We see this trend now. We just talked about the Lightning. You know, you win a couple of Stanley Cups or you win a Stanley Cup, and then for the next 3 years, you can't win a series, or you have a lot of difficulty in the playoffs. And I don't think that's, shocking to anybody that it takes a lot out of you to win a couple of Stanley Cups in the case of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Every year, it seemed like one guy or another was out. Malkin's got a bad wrist, or Letang's, got this, or Crosby's banged up. Like, it looks right now like the Penguins core is as healthy as they have been during the post, back-to-back Stanley Cup run. They added Brian Burke to, manage things over there. They started populating around the edges. And I think they've done that in a way that has, certainly their metrics are as good as they've been in the last few years. And then we look at the Rangers and I just go, this is a pretty average team that has one scary monster. And that's the guy, Igor, in goal. And again, I'm terrified on a game-to-game basis when you're going against a guy who's that good in goal. But when we're talking about betting and fading and this, that, or whatever, I can't rely on the superhuman goaltending thing. Goaltending is just so sketchy that history is littered. New York Ranger history is littered with top level goaltenders. Oh, we're just going to ride King Henrik. Boom, we're out in the first round. Boom, we're out in the second round, right? They went to the finals 1 year. Other than that, it's a lot of disappointment with a guy who was a Hart Trophy candidate in Henrik Lundqvist. Now they got a Hart Trophy candidate in Igor Shesterkin. And I just look at it and I go, I'm never going to back the team that is riding the goaltender, because all it takes, is he going to steal 4 out of 7 games? Because that might be what's required here. And then finally, this is a series that I don't have a very high home ice advantage rating for either of these teams. This is one where either team can win on the other team's home ice. And I actually think that benefits Pittsburgh, because I think there's a very strong chance that they get game 1 or one of these first 2 games. And so I'm looking at anything with a plus in front of it in game 1. I'm hoping we can get a +110. My numbers sort of bear out a +105. Any sort of tiny edge I'm going to take on the Penguins. Give me them in game 1 +105 or better. Give me them in the series. And again, because I don't think this is going to be this home type of a series, give me Pittsburgh -1.5 +165 as well in this series. Don't think either of these teams, Michael mentioned it as far as the Bruins are concerned, don't think either of these teams are necessarily going to compete long-term in the playoffs. Though if it were the Pittsburgh Penguins and they got really good goaltending out of Tristan Jarry, because again, the average to slightly above average goaltenders like Tristan Jarry, they can get hot for a couple of months, right? Whereas if the Rangers' expectation for Shesterkin is just be awesome, be hot all the way through, there's kind of nowhere to go upwards, right? They can only go downwards. And so I'm going to sell high, if you will, on the Rangers, and I'm going to buy low. And again, another Penguins team that you don't have to, talk people into betting over these last few years. Normally I'm on the fade when it comes to the Penguins, whether it was, against the Islanders in the last couple of years or against the Canadians in the bubble. Give me all of the Penguins here. Not necessarily to the level of the Bruins. This is like a mini Bruins type of a situation, but give me the Penguins here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of people were shocked when they saw the series price come out, because the Penguins actually opened -120 at a lot of books here in the States. And I live in New York, so I have a lot of Ranger fans who are like, I don't understand why the Penguins would be favorites if we have home ice, we have Igor, Tristan Jarry is questionable for the first 2 games. Like, what's going on here? What am I missing? And you just got to remind people that when you're playing this playoff series, the majority of, just like in the regular season over, the long term, like, you play most of the games at 5-on-5. And if you look at the 5-on-5 numbers, Pittsburgh is a couple tiers above where the Rangers were. The Rangers did improve over, the course of the season. They made some, trade deadline acquisitions that helped bolster their forward depth, which really helped. But still, this is a team that really has struggled to generate scoring chances at 5-on-5, which sounds really odd because they have, 53, 52 goal scoring Chris Kreider. They have Artemi Panarin, who scores points for fun. Mika Zibanejad is a great facilitator of the puck as well. Like, this is a team that should be creating more, but they're so focused on protecting Igor and doing their best to kind of, accentuate that advantage that they have over everybody, that they don't really do much at 5-on-5 going the other way. And I think that means what you're asking is, all right, the Penguins are likely going to have, more shot attempts, more scoring chances every game at 5-on-5. So that you're asking, can Igor, steal a game here? Then he'd have to perform at like a B+ or higher level threshold than for every game. And that's a lot to ask of any goalie when you're playing a good team every night, similar to what I was saying about the Leafs, right? Like, Igor, sure, he's the best goalie in the league this season, but he didn't play the Pittsburgh Penguins every night. He didn't play Sidney Crosby every night. He didn't play, Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin, Jake Gensel. Like, this is a really good scoring offense. So I think that you're getting a little bit of a discount here on Pittsburgh because of the public perception of the series, which is, we're getting a gift number, right? We're getting a great number here on the Rangers, a team that really had a surprising season. They never slowed down. So, credit to them for that. But, now you got to be able to handle Pittsburgh, and not to mention, like, this Sidney Crosby guy, he's the type of player that will win his matchup basically every series. Now, he didn't do it against Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech last year because they're two of the best, defensive defensemen we've ever seen for the Islanders. But he's going to, you can basically put the Zibanejad line or, the Rangers second line and say, which one do you want Crosby to nullify? And he will do it for 7 games. And now you're asking, okay, now it's a battle between the other 3 lines. And I give Pittsburgh an advantage there. So I think the Penguins, like Matt was saying, I like Pittsburgh here. I think, playing them at a big number to cover a series spread is wise, because I think that the series is close, but I make the Penguins favorite. And I think people are still overrating what the Rangers did. That, of course, they can win. I mean, it's blind like this for a reason. But I think Pittsburgh really has a good chance here to get off their playoff schneid. And if you are interested, I think one thing we talk about with Conn Smythe futures is, and I'm like Matt, I don't think Pittsburgh's ceiling is all that high, but they're what, like 20 to 1-ish also in the futures market, maybe a little north of that, depending on where you're looking. Sidney Crosby's 50 to 1 to win the Conn Smythe. So if you're going to bet the Penguins to win the Stanley Cup, if they do win the Stanley Cup, Sidney Crosby is almost certainly going to win the Conn Smythe, right? Like, these are human beings that vote on the Conn Smythe.
Mm-hmm.
If the Penguins get to the Stanley Cup Finals, he might win the Conn Smythe because of the way that the hockey media handles this guy. So 50 to 1 on Crosby, if you're interested in the Penguins, is an interesting price, especially if, like the Bruins, the Metro Division bracket is a lot softer. So you're looking at, coin flip series with the Rangers, then probably another coin flip series with the Hurricanes or Bruins. And if you end up in the conference finals with a Crosby at 50 to 1 Conn Smythe ticket, if Pittsburgh's there, he's probably going to be 12 to 1 by the time that series starts in a couple weeks. So that's how I'm playing Pittsburgh. But like Matt, I think that they're the value side here, game 1 and series line.
So from Sidney Crosby to his rival, Mr. Alexander Ovechkin, I'll stick with you, Michael, as we go to the Caps and Panthers series. The Panthers obviously running away with the President's Trophy in the NHL, but we know that doesn't necessarily or ever really translate into success in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? So how do you see this series playing out between the Caps and the Panthers?
Yeah, this one's going to be a lot of pain, actually. I'm not thrilled about it, but the more and more I dig into it, the more and more I think I just got to play the Capitals. I think it's 260 now, where I was looking, prepping this. I was hoping, that number came down a little bit. It was like as high as like 3 to 1 on the series price for Washington. If I could get a number closer to that, I'll take it. I don't believe in it. I think that the Capitals goaltending they have one too many flaws in this matchup. You know, if they had shored up maybe one or two of them, maybe got a little bit more consistent goaltending, especially from Vitek Vanacek, and who I think is like Jack Campbell, and like we'll say about Casey DeSmith and other goalies. I don't think he's going to be terrible, but when you're playing the Florida Panthers, you need to be way above average, right? Like you're going to need to stop this offense that can put up 50 shots a night if they want to, every night. And it comes down to a couple things too. Like if Washington goes out 2-0 in game one, Vanacek is still going to need to stand on his head, because that game state is going to favor the Panthers, where they're like, all right, we're down 2-0. We're going to just need to pound the puck at this goaltender and just basically take many, many risks. And that's what the Panthers do best. They're really good going forward. They're great in transition, and they're very good in basically ignoring their defensive responsibilities and creating a 4-on-2 every chance they get. Now, when you're playing better teams, that will end up biting you. But I don't think Washington is that type of team. However, they are clinical, right? Like the Caps are always near the top of the NHL in shooting percentage because of Ovechkin, because they have playmakers like Backstrom and Oshie, and guys like, Tom Wilson, who just sucks up a ton of gravity when he's on the ice, and John Carlson on the back end. So I do think that there are enough signals to back Washington at a big number, but it's like one of those bets where you just grimace and like, all right, I'm going to lose this bet. I almost want to forget about it. And guess what? Like if you get, the Capitals and if they go up 3-2 in a series, like then you can start paying attention, but not what I'm looking forward to making, but it'll probably be Washington or nothing for me.
Yeah, you can hear the just absolute disdain for the bet that he wants to make in Michael's voice there, can't you? And I'm fortunate here. I have this as 92% for Florida to win this series. And once we get to that level, then there isn't going to be a price, thankfully, that tells me that I should be betting on the Washington Capitals, right? So I don't have to deal with the pain. And one of the many things that I like about Michael is that he's not afraid to fire away on a big underdog, because I myself am somewhat famous for liking the odd underdog, especially when it comes to the NHL. So and there will be other ones that I certainly go, well, maybe this one isn't a well, maybe for me. I just think Florida is, by far the better team here. All series derivatives are therefore going to have some value. The better the value will come is the quicker the series, right? So sweep will have more value than the market says. 4-1 Florida will have more value than the market says. And when I look at this and I go, how could I possibly have two hockey teams who are playoff hockey teams have this much of a disparity? How could I get to 92% from a sort of narrative standpoint, right? Because the numbers say 92%. Well, how can the narrative, sort of go with that? I just look at these as two teams heading in different directions, right? The Caps haven't done anything in the playoffs since winning the Stanley Cup. I guess that's a theme, right? Whether it's the Blues last year getting absolutely walloped by the Avalanche, whether it's the aforementioned Penguins not doing much, right? You win a Stanley Cup. Sorry, the penalty is you are basically done for the next 3 years. In the case of the Capitals, you can see why that would be, right? Everybody getting old, and as much as Ovechkin's still piling up the goals, and it'll be interesting to see if he ends up passing Gretzky. Like that hasn't done them any good in these last few seasons, right? And as Michael mentions, yeah, they have this incredibly good conversion rate on high danger scoring chances, right? Like when they get chances, they convert them because they have that high end talent. But those numbers, the gross numbers on chances have dropped precipitously. And so even though that they have this 17% high danger chance conversion rate, which is like 3 or 4% higher than league average, they're still the only team of these 16 teams that I have rated below 500 when it comes to basically even strength play. And the goaltending isn't there the same way that the Rangers, have the goaltending. And as Michael and I've mentioned, right, power play doesn't mean as much. And by the way, the power play this year is pretty pedestrian at about 18% for the Capitals. So they don't even have that thing that they're relying on. And so meanwhile, okay, well, how did the Panthers get here, right? If you're just sort of listening to this going like, I'm kind of a tangential hockey fan. How did the Panthers get here? Well, they got here by obviously having really good players that almost beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last year. And when I say almost, it wasn't that like, oh, this went to game 7 or there was overtime and all that sort of thing. Is the on-ice play for them, they were better than the Tampa Bay Lightning at even strength. Problem is, Tampa Bay added Nikita Kucherov right before the series and had like a 45% power play clip. And the goaltending really let them down to the point where they were on their third goaltender by the end of that series last year. Now that's the big issue, right? Sergei Bobrovsky. And it's funny how it takes 2 years for everybody to jump off a goaltender or off a player, where it's like, okay, Sergei Bobrovsky, I'm worried about him. This year, his metrics are actually pretty good. He's in the top 7 of playoff goaltenders in goals saved above expectation, which honestly, if you're the Florida Panthers, you would take slightly above average when it comes to your goaltending. There's a reason this guy was given a 7-year, $70 million contract 3 years ago, because he was one of, if not the best goaltender in the league before Vasilevsky sort of took that crown away from him. If he can get back to not just that, I'm just asking for him to be slightly better than average here. This is a team that I don't know why they're not the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, right? I guess, I understand that the Avalanche have on paper this really sort of high talented team, and they missed, had all of their really star players miss a bunch of time, and all of that sort of stuff is kind of pie in the sky in a lot of ways, because the last time we saw the Colorado Avalanche in the playoff, they were just overwhelmed in against Vegas last year in the second round. And so I look at this and I go, I realize they're the second choice, which is pretty high up there. But if by definition, I think they should be the first choice to win the Stanley Cup. And I think that they have this almost guaranteed, run here through this first round, where they should probably be pretty healthy going into a second round against either the Tampa Bay Lightning, who they are more than familiar with in the next round, or if hell freezes over and the Toronto Maple Leafs win a series, they're going against all those sort of demons, if you will. Like, I think the Panthers route is actually sneaky, not easy, but actually low key, kind of comfortable for them. And so I look at it and I go, man, if you can get 5-1 on this Panthers team that has been clear cut the best team, again, a lot of that's weighted to after the AllStar break in the same way that I did with the Bruins. If you can get that with the best team and they're not being treated as the best team, I'm in on that. So I got series -1.5 at -150. I got series -2.5 plus 150. I don't know that I'm dying to necessarily play this game to game, because obviously crazy stuff can happen in a one game sample size, but I'm definitely on the Panthers at plus 500 to win the Stanley Cup.
Wow. I mean, hey, Florida Panthers, they've been on a run. So it's been a great season for them. And maybe this is when the President's Trophy actually means something come Stanley Cup playoff time. We'll get back to the pod in a sec. But first, be a pro and win. Introducing DRF Sports' all-new premium data feature on drf.com/sports. For $99 a year, which is just $8.25 a month, you can get industry-leading betting trends, angles, and analytics. With so many big sporting events here, it's the best way for you to make some money this postseason and have fun while doing it. That's DRF Sports Pro. Sign up now at drf.com/sports. So we'll see how that goes. But Matt, we'll stick with you as we switch to the West. The Kings and Oilers series gets underway, and a lot of focus, especially up here in Canada, about Mr. Connor McDavid and how that team will do in the playoffs yet again. We're waiting on the run from Mr. McDavid in the playoffs. But how do you see this series playing out with the Kings and Oilers here?
Yeah, so I think the Oilers have a coach. Finally, they have a system. They have some depth, right? They have everything that they need. Obviously, the big time question is, well, do they have goaltending? Because that's what's nipped them against the Blackhawks 2 years ago and against the Jets last year. And last year was the all-time outlier series in like maybe the history of hockey, though somebody in stats and information are going to have to back me up on that. 60-38 in even strength, high danger chances for the Oilers over the Jets last year. And they got swept in the series. Like, that is incredible to think about, right? And that's going to happen for two reasons. One, the other team's goaltender is much better than yours, and your goaltender is much, much worse than average, right? And two, listen, we went to three different of those 4 games went to overtime, right? Like, this is the type of thing that can happen in the playoffs, right? Doesn't happen that very often, especially when you're going to 22 more high danger chances created even strength. So they played really well at even strength. They have the power play that features Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They just didn't have the goaltending. Now, the problem is it's not like anything from this regular season has indicated that the goaltending is going to turn around. Mike Smith has played pretty well, Koskinen okay. Like, that was the same deal going into the playoffs last year, and it just all fell apart. So I can't guarantee you that in 4 games that it's all going to like be hunky-dory here for this series. The point is I got to just kind of go with the law of averages here. And this is another situation like Florida, where if the Oilers just get average goaltending, they are going to be fine against an LA Kings team that outperformed expectation maybe more than any other, certainly of any team that was expected to not make the playoffs, right? Their veteran guys have had really good seasons, right? Dustin Brown has found a more sort of suitable role to him. And more importantly, other guys have sort of populated that top 6 role. Adrian Kempe has like 35 goals. I didn't even really realize that was a thing that was occurring in my life. All of that stuff is happening, but like it feels like the goal has been accomplished for the Kings, whereas the Oilers season really just starts this time around. And I'm going to steal one of Michael's strategies when he mentioned Sidney Crosby. And I would, even going back to that, I would say like, at least there's a Malkin who we have seen win a Conn Smythe. And you could even make the case that if the difference maker is going to be in goal with like a Tristan Jarry or even defense Chris Letang, like those guys could take some of the probability. I'm talking like 5% of the win probability in that connection. Connor McDavid is 105% going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup. Like, it's not that he's the only reason Leon Draisaitl's good. It's those two are so connected as far as what their stats are going to be that, like Michael mentioned, right? Like the votes are coming in on Connor McDavid. They might have already started to come in, and it's just a matter of hammering a stamp on the envelope at this point. And so I look at it and I go like Connor McDavid 30-1. If it's even 1 cent better of a price on Connor McDavid than it is the Oilers. Michael has heard this story before because I did this last year and then watched the Oilers get swept. So I will blame myself for this, and maybe that will happen again. But anytime the Oilers are involved, it is Connor McDavid or nothing. So yeah, I am automatically going to have a bet on Connor McDavid to win the Conn Smythe. That is going to act as my Oilers to win the Stanley Cup bet. Again, it is not a massive bet, but it is an obligatory bet from now until the end of eternity, or at least the end of Connor McDavid's career. He is going to win a Stanley Cup. I say that sort of with a question mark at the end of it. But when he does, he's going to win the Conn Smythe. And so if you're going to keep giving it to me at 30-1 every time around here, eventually by the time we're all dead and buried, he's going to win it. We are going to be profitable on this bet. Connor McDavid 30-1 to win the Conn Smythe. Oof. Oh, and I should mention Oilers -1.5 in the series, -2.5 in the series, +200. And exact series 4-1 +333 are my bets.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I am I grew up as an Oilers hater in my betting life because of the goaltending and because of the fact that their defense could never get it sorted out. The team, I kind of had an epiphany when they changed head coaches and started to realize this team is good. They are actually not more than just the sum of their parts right now. And if Mike Smith, God love Mike Smith, right? Like there's probably just therapists out there that all they do is talk about Mike Smith with Oilers fans, with hockey bettors and whatever. Like this guy is just outrageous the way he can just on a dime either be the worst goalie in the world or the best goalie in the world. And right now he's playing closer to the latter. Like I'm not saying he's the best goalie in the world, but he's in great form, and he's been in great form since basically the new year. So I'm just going to trust that. And these are famous last words when you're saying that about Mike Smith. But I'm going to trust that he is closer to the goalie we've seen over the second half of the season rather than the one we saw for the 15 months prior to that. So I like Edmonton too. I think I played them to sweep at 6-1. I think that this team, like, there's the gap between these two teams is wide, and it's not only is it wide, but the matchup is just brutal for the Kings, who don't have the horses you need to just at least skate with McDavid and keep him to 2 or 3 goals a night. Daryl Sutter had a great line in a press conference talking about Guy Lafleur the other day, and they're like, what are your memories about playing against him? And he's like, oh, I did a great job. I held him to 3 goals one night, and that was his like memory.
Yeah.
And like that's what you need to do with McDavid. Basically, is like you got to just keep him off a crooked number. You got to keep him to a goal and an assist per night, and the Kings don't even really have that. So I just Matt basically said it. Like the Oilers here, I think any which way, play them to sweep. Play if they lose game 1, like Matt said, game by game, think crazy things happen. If Edmonton loses game 1, I'm going to be happy to jump back in on the series price here. Even if they lose, the first 2, I would be happy to jump back in on the series price. I think that there are a lot of ways to play this series, and they're all going to have to do with Edmonton. And I think you're going to see something funny here, which is a lot of betting people are going to be saying this is the, we're going with the Oilers. And then if you talk to hockey media people who maybe aren't as in tune with it, they're just going to say, oh, who's your upset? There's always an upset in the first round. And a lot of people are going to pick the Kings just because the Oilers are the Oilers and they have that reputation. And a lot of people are just going to look at the goaltending. So I think it's going to be an interesting kind of dichotomy here. Whereas, a lot of betting people are going to say, no, this is not the year you want to pick against the Oilers. And all the media people who last year were saying, this is the year for the Oilers, like they're going to get through the Jets, like are now going to jump to saying, this is the Kings. And it's going to be a funny thing. And who knows, maybe the Kings do sweep the Jets, sweep the Oilers, because this is just a stupid sport.
Yeah.
We'll stick with you here, Mike, and we'll go to the Blues and the Wild series here, which, pardon the pun, will maybe be a wild series in terms of scoring, two high scoring teams. How will that translate into the playoffs with these two teams?
Yeah, it's interesting because both of these teams have a reputation of being defense first. Like that's how the Blues won the Stanley Cup. The Wild have been a team that's near the top of the league in preventing and suppressing scoring chances. And then this year, all of a sudden, both just turned it up a couple of notches. And a lot of it has to do with for the Wild, the continued emergence of Kirill Kaprizov, the breakout season from Kevin Fiala. So they got two legitimate scorers, which is something they didn't really have. They used to have, last season they had Kaprizov and then a lot of really supporting guys. Now they have two stars in that top six, whereas the Blues made that trade for Pavel Buchnevich from the Rangers in the offseason, and that completely changed their top nine into a top nine rather than just a two good top, a top six. So both these teams are deep at forward. This is a complete numbers play. I think both of these teams are really, really good. I think the goaltending is going to end up being a wash. I know a lot of people like Marc-Andre Fleury and his, playoff pedigree, etc. But between him and Cam Talbot, and then Ville Husso and Jordan Binnington on the other side, I think we might see four goaltenders in the series. Yeah. It's a wash. Like you're just going to have a tough time picking who's going to be the better goaltending team. And I think similarly, the offense, like the Blues are so deep offensively. So it's like almost like, do they beat you through their scoring by committee approach versus Minnesota's, we'll rely on our star guys and then our defense to bottle things up. So I just think looking at the series, there's really just not that much that separates these two teams. And I know a lot of models out there actually are very bullish on the Wild's chances. I disagree. I think that, plus 130 on the Blues and the series prices is great because I think this thing is close to a coin flip. And, I have a Blues ticket from before the season, so I'm happy with that one. And I think Buchnevich, he's 100-1 to win the Conn Smythe is a sneaky pick because I think that he's built for this kind of style of hockey. He's a great two-way player, good power play guy, and he's playing on that top line. So he'll have the chance to rack up points if the Blues can go on a surprising run.
Yeah, Michael's right. We could see four goaltenders. This is an absolute sweepstakes of a series for me. And what happens when it's an absolute sweepstakes? Anything is possible, right? So I don't disagree that taking, plus money on the series winner is fair. I would need a little bit / a lot more to grab the Blues. I think minus 140 in game one because of the home ice for the Wild is a fair price. And I'll be betting the Wild in game one just based on that. But that's as far as I'm going to go as far as taking a side. I look at this, two teams, very similar metrics, right? Very similar deal with the high scoring teams. We don't know what's going on with the goaltending. Anything could kind of happen here. And it looks because of the odds, right? This is going to be priced like a series that should go long because this is kind of a coin flippy type of a series. So I'm going to zag a little bit when it comes to that. And I'm going to take the under 5.5 total games here. And I'm doing that because I don't know who's going to win in 5 games because both of these teams are certainly capable. And honestly, they're capable of disaster in their own net and sort of losing by that way. And so think of it like the Oilers and the Jets, where like those games last year were really competitive, obviously 3 going to overtime and a 4th that could have, 4 really close games, all went one way, just kind of on variance, right? And so I kind of think we might have that similar type of a deal here where would it be surprising if the Blues swept or 1-5? Certainly not. And it definitely wouldn't if the Wild swept or 1-5. So you're getting plus 145 on under 5.5 total games. So it's honestly just kind of a math play going, all right, if you're going to price everything in the market with an expectation of this going 6 or 7 games, obviously that's the favorite. If plus 145, right, is for under 5.5, we're talking about minus 175, something like that for 6 and 7. If you're going to expect this to go that way because it's a closely matched series, but there's all kinds of goals going to be scored and we could have 6-4 games in complete total chaos, I'm going to sort of zig from that standpoint. So I'm not going to take a side in the series. I'm just going to go under 5.5 total games with a bet on the Wild to win game one at -140, because I think that's a fair price to start this series off.
All right. All right. With that said, Matt, we'll stick with you in the Stars and Flames series, which gets underway on Tuesday. How much are you looking forward to this series in terms of betting on it? Which side are you on?
Yeah, I'm so now I'm doing the Michael thing where I'm not looking forward to this series because I'm probably going to be on the Stars a fair amount, right? This is my Caps Panthers, if you will, where I'm just wildly uncomfortable about it, because from a like hockey eye test standpoint, there's not really that much to not like about the Flames, right? Like they have the Matthew Tkachuks of the world, right? Who last we saw in the playoffs was having to be removed from a series against the Stars that might have turned things in the favor of the Stars. And so they get this rematch. And so there's reason to like the Flames. Problem is, we're pricing things, right? We are valuing things. We are putting an evaluation on a team from a number standpoint. And we're looking at a series price of +290 and a game to game, certainly in Calgary, of +185 to +190. And so I just look at this and I go, this another weird thing about this year, there are two teams playing quote unquote playoff hockey coming into the playoffs because nobody in the East was worried about their playoff spot, right? You can talk about seeding and all of that sort of thing. But honestly, you and I have talked about this, Sheldon, numerous times. When people are talking about seeding and motivations and that sort of thing, I don't buy into that. It's either get in or don't get in when you're a professional athlete. The Stars are one of the two teams that have been playing that style of hockey. And I think there's a chance to jump on a team as an underdog to maybe get that surprising road win in game one. I think it's the Stars, and you're getting a +190, +185 price tag to do so. So, the Flames were pretty good, but their best stretch was mid-season. It wasn't necessarily like lighting it up at the end, but again, they didn't need to because they had the division locked up because of that good stretch in the middle of the season. But that's what's created all kinds of buzz. They win the division, but their play has slipped in my numbers from 14% above average down to quote unquote just 9% above average, which again makes them favorites against the Stars here, but just by not this much. And so I don't really want the Stars to win this series from a betting standpoint, but what it's going to do is it's going to make every other Stars derivative a little bit more valuable. So I'm going to take the Stars +1.5 in the series. It's available at +125, right? So that means just force a game 7 or win the series in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to play a little underdog in the first game and going to play them in the underdog series handicap point spread, or however you want to game spread, however you want to call it. I'm going to play it that way. I still think the Flames advance, and maybe this is me sort of cowarding at this point because, a young Matt Russell of maybe last year would have just said Stars win this series. I'm going to play it a little more conservatively here with the +1.5 series game line.
Yeah, I think the Flames actually are built to just handle the series. I think the goaltending is a huge disparity. I think the 5-on-5 play, the Stars are a team that just, as they got into the playoffs with a negative goal differential, they're really good at getting games to overtime. That won't really help in the playoffs when it's 5-on-5. So I believed in this Flames team all season. I'll pat myself on the back because I have them to win the Stanley Cup at 45-1 from preseason, and I have a Daryl Sutter to win the Jack Adams. So I've been a believer. I'm just going to keep believing that this Flames team is just too deep to get found out here. I think it could be a little tricky. The Stars are a very tricky team, but I think just the depth is going to win out here, and we could see a pretty short one. So I'll be playing Flames -2.5 at plus money at a big number. I think is worth a shot. But other than that, not too much betting interest here, and what I think should be and hope will be pretty straightforward for Calgary.
So you believe in the Calgary Flames, but just to wrap things up here, do you believe in the Preds or the Avs? One more series to go here.
Oh boy. That 2 weeks ago, there was a very simple path to success for Nashville. Saros, one of the best goalies in the world. If he can just stand on his head in a best-of-7 series, maybe Nashville can win a couple games, make it interesting. Who knows? Maybe they could steal a series. We've seen this happen before. There's always a big upset in the first round. Everybody will remind you of that fact. But Dave Riddick is not Saros. He is a below average goaltender, below replacement level goaltender for the Predators. And when you're going to get pummeled by 40 plus shots a night, and a lot of them being great shots from great players, boy, Big Save Dave is going to have himself a little bit of a long series here. So, it's one of those things that's going to be tough, I think, to find a betting standpoint. But I think that the way I'm going to play this series is rooting for an Avalanche blowout in game one. I think the Preds right now, I got a plus 250 for game one. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's playable, but I think that, let's say Colorado wins 6-1 in game one. This is a phenomenon we see in the playoffs all the time. The books will overreact to that blowout. And the next thing you know, you're going to see Nashville at a ridiculous price for game two. And, the odds tell you it's 50-50 that Nashville wins at least one of these games. So if game one is a blowout and you see this price on Nashville blow out of proportion after they get their doors blown off of them in game one, you're just going to have to plug your nose and play the Predators, because that could be the way you come out of the series with, plus 330 winner on the Predators, that you get the game that they win, right? So that's how I'm going to play it. I'm just going to sit back and hope that, Nashville gets absolutely pummeled in game one. They get lucky in game two at a bigger price. And I know that's a lot of hypotheticals, but for a series like this, there's not much else to really talk about from a betting standpoint. And I will say that people are going to say, oh, should I bet Nathan MacKinnon to win this, to Conn Smythe? The Avalanche are the favorites. They should win the Stanley Cup. I would stay so far away from any Conn Smythe bets on the Avalanche, because there's about 13 guys that can win this thing. And I don't believe that, finding the right one, if you can do it, God bless, but not going to try to do it.
So I think Michael and I are headed to the same spot, but we are driving different vehicles in order to get there, right? From a mathematical perspective, I look at this and I go, I have to play Nashville plus 250 in game one. A couple of different reasons. One, I crunched the numbers as far as when Saros is playing versus when Rittich was playing over the course of this season. And the interesting thing is Saros, I think he played 1 or 2 times against the Avalanche, but Rittich has played in the past against the Avalanche this year. And the pricing was about a 5 to 6% probability adjustment when Saros was out and Rittich was in. Then they played, ironically, on Thursday. Literally last Thursday, after Saros got injured, Rittich got the call in Colorado. Nashville won the game 5-4. Now, again, that's less important from a results standpoint, because, listen, that's the end of the regular season. Neither team having that much to play for. I don't know that we're going to see 5-4 games, though honestly, with the Avalanche, that's still in the realm of possibility. But the line was plus 260. And so there's been a small adjustment down to plus 250, I guess, because the Predators showed that they can at least compete even in a regular season game without UC Saros. But the point is those other games were plus 150, plus 170 in Colorado. And then Nashville was a plus 110, plus 120 home underdog. So now all of a sudden we've gotten into this zone where we're in the plus 250s for a Nashville team that, outside of Saros, is nasty. It's a really, really sort of tough playoff-y type of a team, all of that, all those sort of cliches. And so I just look at this from a numbers standpoint. Again, I don't think Nashville's going to win, so I don't really have any interest in the plus 500. But once you get to a point where you're pricing things like plus 250 on the road, what I will imagine would be probably about a plus 150 at home. Look at it this way. If they win 1 out of 3 games, 1, 2, and 5 in Colorado, you're going to be profitable if you bet the money line in every single game. Now, it's going to get a little dicey come game 5 if there is one, but I digress. If you get one of those two, right, you're up 2.5 units and you're down 2 units, you're going to be profitable there. If you get even a split in Nashville, right, you're going to be up 1.5 units, you're going to be down a unit there. So it's more of a math thing where it comes to okay, can they get this to game 6? Can they just even get this to potentially game 5, depending on the road that they take? And so I'm more interested in grabbing Nashville in game 1, maybe get that plus 250 winner, and then sort of Homer Simpson myself back into the hedge and stay away from the rest of the series, or maybe go in on Nashville once they get it home. This is, in my opinion, a chance to grab a 2.5 unit win here on game 1 for a team that, again, just competed with Colorado. When it comes to the Avalanche, we already know what we're going to get with their talent, right? This isn't anything to do with, oh man, I don't love the Avalanche, etc. I agree with Michael. I just can't pay any long-term prices when it comes to the Avalanche. And in the short term here, the prices are such that they're prohibitive as well. And this is a team that I liked last year to absolutely destroy the Blues. They did in the first round, but then it went a little hairy once they got to the Golden Knights. I think that's probably a situation down the line here that I'm going to be looking to fade the Avalanche a little bit more aggressively. Here, it's really just a matter of Predators could you get a couple of wins here to help a brother out? I mean, I don't ask for much here. Let's just try to force a game 6 here. Maybe get the Smashville crowd fired up. Maybe get a couple of games. If, worst case scenario, get a couple of games in games 3 and 4 to stretch this out a little bit here. But yeah, give me Nashville plus 250 on the money line in game 1, and then give me the series plus 2.5, minus 110 for a plus 2.5 on a Predators team that, again, outside of the goaltending, there's not really that much wrong with this team. It's a team that I still have above average for this season.
All right, sounds good. I mean, we went through each and every series there, but there's still one last thing that I want to beg you guys for. Is it possible to get a Stanley Cup pick? Is that something you guys are in on? Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I said it off the jump, man. I like these Bruins 20-1. I think that you're getting a team that we usually see in this kind of form at 8-1, 11-1. So you're getting double the odds on a team that has just showed us since the beginning of the new year that they are a Stanley Cup contender. They haven't stopped showing us that, and they're getting the goaltending that they need. This team doesn't need, stand on your head goaltending like others do. They play so strong defensively. They're so strong in their own zone. They're so good at keeping games on script that they should be able to pay off at 20-1. I think that they should be in line with teams like Carolina and Toronto and Tampa Bay in terms of their prices. So I'll take the value on the Bruins, a team that I'll be betting on a lot this postseason. I'll either be going down with the ship or partying on Fleet Street, I guess it is, later this year.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, you know me, I play these things a little bit more conservatively. I like to get a little sort of, team effort going here when it comes to my Stanley Cup picks. I'm with Michael with regards to Boston. Basically, I'm going to take one out of every sort of little quadrant here. Boston's going to be in that quadrant. I'm going to go with the Panthers. Mentioned that, obviously, at plus 400 or better. I still think that's a pretty decent bet. And then in the West, I'm going to get a little spicier. Again, this isn't necessarily a prediction of who's going to come through the West. It's really just a value play here. I mentioned the Minnesota Wild as a team that I'm not even really positive they're getting out of the first round. But if they do, I like their chances against Colorado, against any of those teams out West. They're available at sort of as low as 16-1. You can do a little bit better than that. And then, as I mentioned, I would normally say the Oilers, but instead I'm going to say the Connor McDavids, because the Connor McDavid Conn Smythe bet is going to act as my Oilers future there. And if you wanted something elsewhere from Alberta, I look at Matthew Tkachuk, a guy that we didn't mention with regards to sort of a big picture standpoint. He's 33-1 to win the Conn Smythe. One last thing on the Conn Smythe. It's really tricky market to bet because there's like 3 to 8 guys on any good team that's capable of winning. The Flames have 3 to 8 guys who are capable, but we have to remember voters. What do they like? In other sports, it's flash. In hockey, it's grit. And Matthew Tkachuk is a guy who's going to be problematic for teams. And if the Flames make a run to the Stanley Cup, he's going to get a ton of credit for not just stuff that happens on the statistical score sheet, but on the stuff that happens in the dirty areas in hockey. Voters love that sort of thing. So a little bit of a hedge there with Alberta in its entirety with Tkachuk and McDavid as my 2 Conn Smythe picks out of that little quadrant of the bracket.
That's amazing. Lots of value, lots of action here for the people to choose from. Matt, where can the people find you online just to find where they can get more of your spiciness, so to speak?
Yeah, Fast and Furious over at The Score. Check out, everybody's got the app already on their phone. They can read my stuff there. And of course, at Emrus Authentic on Twitter, everything's getting retweeted through there. And we'll go through the anguish that is playoff overtime on a nightly basis over on Twitter at Emrus Authentic.
We got also the Action Network's Michael Leboff. Mike, where can we find you online? And give us a plug for the pod, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the Big Lebowski with 2 E's. And the podcast we do, it's bi-weekly during the regular season. It's called Line Change, but during the postseason, it'll be coming out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays until the NHL schedule gets all jammed up, and will change as according. But you can find that obviously anywhere. You can find podcasts. It's called Line Change with an exclamation point on the end of it. It's me and my buddy, So Money Sports, a professional bettor out there in British Columbia. So a fellow Canucks fan, just like Matt, who has the pleasure of betting against his team all the time. But yeah, there and on the Action Network, we got a ton of NHL playoff coverage. And, obviously we're covering every other sport as well. So we're always happy to have you over there.
Guys, thanks. This was amazing in terms of getting the goodness on the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. This was great. Thanks to both of you guys for tuning in, and hopefully we can check in again, maybe somewhere during the middle when the Leafs are making their Stanley Cup run.
You won't see me for that one.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Shel.
And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Don't forget to like and subscribe to DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also rate us, review us, like us, all that other fun stuff. But for more from this new project from DRF Sports, just a little reminder, if you're unfamiliar with the letters DRF, it stands for Daily Racing Forum, which has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we've taken over the entire sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, college sports, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all of the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, team stats, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, drf.com/sports. That's where you can find the usual previews as we deep dive into the games. Of course, we got you covered on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. Again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. That's all I got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.